We've all seen someone on social media making money from something and thought, oh my gosh, I have to try that too. Reality is, there are a lot of ways that you can make money, but that doesn't mean that you should do them all. Chasing every income opportunity can actually keep you stuck in a mediocre middle ground instead of excelling in anything and building real wealth. By the end of today's episode, you'll have a framework for identifying your lane and the confidence to say no to everything else.
I find myself doing this all the time. And I don't even want to say if you're in the social media space, but if you are a consumer of content on social media, I feel like you find yourself doing it too, where you're seeing someone online posting how they're making money, whether it's they're breaking down their numbers or just sharing their income streams. And you're like, oh my gosh, I should be doing that too. I know one good example of this for me is on the podcast, we talk a lot about the difference from being an influencer and being a content creator. And I know Grace and I definitely identify as content creators, not influencers. But then I'll look on social media and I will see an influencer on a brand trip or something like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I would just share every aspect of my life and post 10 times a day and really be an influencer and step into being an influencer, maybe I could go on a brand trip too. I think that that's just one example of how seeing someone else's success in a different lane can really hinder your own success because all of a sudden, instead of getting really good at one thing, you're now trying to do 10 different things and you're never going to be good at 10 different things. So I'm excited for this episode. I think we're going to share some frameworks, some tips to pick your lane, stay in your lane, and block out the noise.
Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Bluevine, the largest small business banking platform in the United States. I've used Bluevine for business banking for almost 3 years now, and it's also the one we use for the podcast as well.
We are always talking about systems and being more productive and organized, and this especially matters when it comes to your business finances. Instead of having an app for banking, another for invoicing, and a third one for payments, you can do all of that right within Bluevine.
I love that it's all in one, but there are actually a few things about Bluevine that really sold me on it too and made me open an account a few years ago. And one was that there are no monthly fees on their core tiers. So you're not paying just to have the account open, which is really nice. Second, you can create sub accounts within your checking account, which I use to separate money that I'm saving for taxes. And I absolutely love that visual separation. And the third thing that really made me go with Bluevine was that Bluevine's business checking account actually earns high yield interest, which I found isn't super common for business checking accounts when I was initially looking for one. And I like that while my money is sitting in my account, that it's actually earning me even more income.
You can apply for Bluevine business checking whether you're a sole proprietor, LLC, corporation, or partnership. Go to bluevine.com/partner slash the life you love podcast. That's bluevine.com/partner/ the life you love podcast to learn more or use the link in the show notes.
I think even outside of being, content creators and influencers, I think about when I was younger and I was picking up a lot of side hustles, and every side hustle I would see, I'm like, "Oh, I should try that. I should do that." And it was like, "Okay, girl." I remember at one time I was trying Instacart, I had DoorDash. I was like, "Maybe I should just do Uber Eats too." And then I focused on Instacart and just getting really good at Instacart, which this was back in 2019 and 2020 around that time. And this is back when they've changed their algorithm now, but they used to do it so where like the faster you were in the store and the more accurate your orders were, you would get the higher paying orders. So there was a whole science to it. And I started to learn that science. And when I did, that's when I actually started getting, like, I was making a lot more money, like $35 to $50 an hour on average from that side hustle. But I was constantly like, oh my gosh, I should try this. I should try that. And I think this topic is relatable whether you are a traditional entrepreneur and, you're trying to build multiple income streams. And so you're looking at what everybody else is doing and you're saying, this income stream looks, profitable. I should try that. I should try this. Or, whether you're a side hustler and you're trying to find a side hustle that you can build into a meaningful amount of income, this comes up so much because I think we see what other people are doing and we feel that FOMO. We're like, oh, am I missing out on something that I don't know what I don't know? And I'm missing out by not doing it. But I think you end up missing out by not doubling down on what is your lane and what your focus should be. And I guess, I don't know, it's just relatable across so many different, whatever kind of entrepreneur or ambitious woman that you are.
Yeah, when we were prepping for this episode, I think we identified 3 kind of main reasons why we don't tend to stay in our own lane and why we tend to try a million different things and get really distracted when we see other people doing different things from what we're doing. The first one, like you just said, you feel that sense of FOMO. You see someone making money on TikTok Shop or someone I saw a girl, the other day, she posted how much money she made on YouTube from YouTube views, and it was, like, over $1,000,000 because she has been doing
Oh my
it for
gosh.
so long. She's such a good YouTuber. She has millions of subscribers. So obviously, she made $1,000,000 off of her YouTube views, right? And why did that make me immediately go, "Oh my gosh, I should get back onto YouTube." Right?
Mhm.
That's our sense of that fear of missing out. So that's definitely the one thing. The second one is operating out of ego. And I think that this is a big one too, right? Like we all do want to be successful, but being afraid that you're not going to be successful if you don't choose the correct path or you don't choose all of the paths, right? You're missing out on something and your ego is a little bit hurt by that because you're seeing someone be successful in a lane that you're not in. And then the third one, I do think it comes from a scarcity mindset, which is not actually believing that the lane that you're in is lucrative enough to make you successful from a financial standpoint. I do think that we see other people's success in different lanes and we say, "Oh, well, if I don't do that, I'm never going to make enough money or I'm never going to be successful just doing what I'm doing." And we are going to talk a little bit about that in today's episode too, just really looking at your market and your price point of your product or the price point of the service that you're providing if you're a side hustler or a freelancer, and remembering that there is well enough wealth to go around in the one lane that you're sticking to, and just getting back to that. So that's some of the things we'll be talking about in today's episode.
Yeah. I know if like, and I want to preface, I guess, for the conversation too, as an entrepreneur, especially, it's really good to have multiple income streams. Like you should. It's wise. Both Erin and I have multiple income streams because you don't want to be solely relying on one. Like if we only relied on brand deals and then, there's seasonality to brand deals, like sometimes of the year, there's just less brand deals happening or less budget for brand deals. And then usually the beginning and the end of the year tend to be really crazy. So if we were just relying on brand deals, we might have good months, in the beginning and end of the year. Yeah, and you get to Q3 and things are drying up a little bit. Maybe that wouldn't be wise, right? Or if we were just relying on freelance work, for example, for me, that would not make me feel secure because, I mean, with each freelance client, I kind of see that as its own like stream of income in a way, which actually makes me feel more secure than if I had a corporate role. Because if I lose one client, I have multiple other ones versus if I had a corporate role and I lost it, all my income goes out the window. But if I was just relying on one freelance client or two freelance clients, which is why I never like I did it once. I had like 2 freelance clients and that filled up my whole thing and it was not good when one needed to cut back hours, but it just puts my eggs into too few baskets to feel really secure in where my money's coming from. So it is wise to have multiple streams of income. However, I think that you can end up kind of getting away from your purpose and your mission too quickly by not allowing yourself to really master anything at all or to get really good at anything or scale anything to a really good point because you're just constantly trying to grasp at different things. And I think that's kind of what we want you guys to get out of this episode is that, there is profitability in your lane and there's a framework that we're going to go through for how to find your lane and how to grow it without losing that sense of direction and purpose.
Absolutely. You can diversify your income streams without diversifying your purpose. And I think that's such a good point because you hear all the time like multiple income streams. I'm a 22-year-old with 10 income streams, and this is how I made $1,000,000 or whatever it may be. But then you hear the flip side of that too, which is that diluted focus gets diluted results. And when you dilute yourself and have 10 different income streams, how do you actually get ahead? And how do you focus enough on one of them to actually get ahead? And I do think that that's a really good differentiating point, which is that you can diversify your income streams without diversifying your purpose. For example, with this podcast, right? Our purpose with this podcast is to help ambitious women build a life they truly love. That is our one purpose. Every single time we film an episode, that's our purpose. However, to fulfill that purpose, we can have multiple income streams. through this podcast, we can have ad sponsors. We can align ourselves with brands that have affiliate programs. So when we're promoting things that you guys sign up for, we can get an affiliate kickback. We can build products. So we can build a digital product that would help you guys build a life you truly love. We can get into coaching if that's something that we want to do. We can build a membership community. There's so many different income streams that can help us fulfill that purpose, but without diluting our purpose. So I do think that's a good differentiating point.
Yeah, and also too, I think we've talked about this transparently on the podcast, but we used to be called Girls Talk Money. If you've been here for a long time, if you're an OG, you know that. But we rebranded to The Life You Love. And when we did, we were like, oh my gosh, we should start a newsletter. We should focus on that. We should start this membership community. We should do this, that. And then we realized, okay, again, our sole purpose is helping ambitious women build a life they love. We need to focus on that purpose and make that really strong before we can start to branch into other things. Now, we were in this unique situation where focusing on that was not helping us. I mean, it was helping us monetize, but it wasn't getting us immediate income. But we knew that if we could make our episodes better, if we could connect with you all more, then when we do choose to branch out to an additional income stream, because right now we just got monetized through Spotify, so we make money there. Then once, that is really solid, we can branch out into those other income streams. Like, okay, let's start maybe a paid newsletter, or let's start a paid membership community, or working with ad sponsors, or whatever it may be. But we focused on that purpose first because that was our lane that we needed to get good at in order for that lane to become monetized and for the other lanes that we want to go into to make sense. But I want to talk to you before we kind of get into this, we call it the find your lane framework. Before we get into that, we want to talk a little bit just about why it even matters to kind of pick a lane and almost stick to it. And I'm not saying, because I am someone who enjoys multiple things. I like having parts of my role that are strategy. I like the creative. I like the video editing. I like filming. I like all of the things. So I'm not saying you have to just do like one thing forever and ever, but you need to pick something, pick a focus to kind of focus on, for lack of better words, and really get good at that. And I want to talk about why that matters a little bit before we get into the framework. But first, I just think that spreading yourself too thin means that you never really get good at anything. And this is kind of like a weird analogy, but I think of it like an octopus. Like we as human beings, we have two arms. You can have your hands in two things at once, right? You are not an octopus. You are not meant to have eight hands in all different things at the same time. When I kind of thought of it that way, I was like, okay, if I can get really good at something and then I can like, hand it off to someone else, have them help me, then I can take my own hand back and put it into something else. But I cannot physically be an octopus and have eight hands in eight different things. That doesn't make sense. And I also think that a large part of success is momentum and is showing up consistently for things. And if you're constantly starting over and trying different things left, right, you're never giving anything a second to cook, it's going to be very difficult to build momentum because momentum comes from showing up consistently. And I think once you start to show up consistently for a certain period of time, that's when you feel it. Like if you have ever started to build a new habit, or let's say you start a new job or whatever, at first you kind of feel a little, you're like, doesn't really seem like anything's happening. I'm going to the gym. My butt's not bigger. What's happening here? And then you go for, a few weeks, a couple months, you're like, wait a second. I'm actually seeing the compounding effects of my efforts. I'm seeing that it's becoming second nature for me to do that habit. I feel more comfortable at work. I'm seeing the results at the gym, whatever it may be. I think a large part of success in business as well is giving things time to compound and build momentum. And if you're not sticking to something for long enough, you're not going to see that momentum and you're not going to feel the results.
I don't know where I heard this. I don't know if it was a podcast that I was listening to, but they compared starting over or this kind of like rebrand topic that we hear a lot about in the New Year's time. Like everybody's talking on social media about rebranding your life, rebranding your business. That's actually very, very counterintuitive to making any progress because our brains hate rebranding. Our brains hate starting over because it's no different than building a new habit. starting to build a habit is hard, and our brains don't like hard because our brain's job is to keep us safe. We talk about this all the time on the
Mhm.
podcast. Our brain's job is to keep us safe. So when we are rebranding, when we are starting over, our brain doesn't want us to do that. It doesn't want us to start a new habit because its job is to keep us safe. So I think that's a really good perspective to keep in mind as well. If you are at the beginning of this kind of like you haven't started to build the momentum yet, it is going to be hard and your brain is going to try really hard to not get you to start doing something or not stick with it because it's hard. But
Yeah.
when you start doing something long enough and the habit is already built, it becomes exponentially easier. And that's when you can start to step into these almost like not different lanes, but adjacent lanes to where you're still moving toward the same purpose, but it's a different means to an end. For example, when I started posting on TikTok back in 2022, I was only posting on TikTok. I didn't have an Instagram account. I wasn't on YouTube. We didn't have this podcast. I wasn't really building any products, anything like that. I was strictly focused on TikTok. And I didn't start posting on Instagram until like 14 months later. So I really gave myself about a year to strictly focus on posting on TikTok before I even branched out into a different platform, even though I could literally just repost the same content onto Instagram. I didn't even go that far. I was like, let me just focus on TikTok. And then about 6 months after that, that's when we started the podcast. And we gave ourselves a good probably like year and a half of doing the podcast before I started posting on YouTube. So you can kind of see how you really do need to give yourself probably a good like year and a half of doing one thing and getting really good at doing the one thing before you can get to this almost nurture state of okay, I'm really good at this thing. It doesn't take me a lot of brain capacity to do this thing in the background. Maybe I can outsource a little bit of those tasks, like outsource your TikTok video editing so you can focus more on your podcast or whatever it may be. But you do need to give yourself a good year and a half of doing something before you get to that phase.
And if the idea of that scares you or freaks you out, because I used to feel that way, I'm like, oh my gosh, like doing one thing for so long, like, like I would really freak me out. We're going to talk a little bit about why that is actually not as scary as you might think. So if you just heard Erin speak and you're like, I'm done with this episode, I've had enough. Like I don't, I'm not the kind of person. I'm just not that girl who can stick to one thing for so long. I promise you, you can. And we're going to kind of reframe that a little bit when we get into this, find your lane framework, because I was that person where I'm like, there's no way I can focus on one thing, but I'm going to kind of reframe that for you later. But the last thing I want to say before we get into this, breaking this find your lane framework down is just that every time you say yes to something misaligned, it's a no to your actual zone of genius. And I think about, I don't know the exact phrase or expression. And if you know it and you know the proper quote, leave it in Spotify. But there's basically this idea that there is a consequence to every single decision that you make. You're giving something up every time you make a decision, right? If you say yes to going to a friend's birthday party, you're saying no to having a relaxing evening by yourself, or maybe going to bed early, or whatever it might be. If you say no to going to that friend's birthday party, you are giving up spending time with your friends, celebrating your friend, being whatever. There is, and of course, some consequences are more desirable than others, or scenarios are more desirable than others. You might really, really want to be there to celebrate your friend. And so the consequence of not being able to have a restful night is worth the sacrifice for you, or whatever it may be. But there is a consequence to every single decision. And there's this woman who I wish I remember what her name was, but I saw this video years ago and it like changed so much for me. She was a counselor or something, like an advisor for students at some Ivy League institution. I don't remember if it was Harvard or Yale, it was one of those. And students would come to her and they would say, I'm just not happy here and I wish I went to Yale. And she would say, well, why do you wish you went to Yale? And these students would say, well, I just think I would have liked Yale better. Or I just regret not choosing Yale. And she would say, well, your regret is only based on your perception that had you chose Yale, you would have liked it more than Harvard. And that's your perception. You actually don't know factually that you would have liked Yale more than you like Harvard. It's all based on your perception of what that is. And so regret is literally just a perception that the other option would have been better, but you actually have no idea. So when you're thinking about these business things and making these decisions in your life, you can sit here and you can have the FOMO and you can have regret over, I wish I tried this, or maybe I should try that, or whatever. But it's all of that, all that FOMO is just based on the perception that another opportunity would have been better, but you really do not know that it would have been until you actually make that choice. So she would say, instead of focusing so much on trying to make the right decision, focus on making a decision and then focus on making that decision right. And I love that so much. I have applied it to so many things. I applied it to moving to Florida, like all sorts of things. So when you're making a decision, whatever decision it is, as you kind of find your lane, make a decision and then focus on making that decision right. And that's going to take you a lot further than if you focus on trying to pick the best income stream and pick this and pick and whatever, because you can just get so wrapped up in that part.
I totally agree. And I think a lot of times that regret comes from we want to almost like hedge our bets, right? Like instead of picking one lane and just going all in on that one thing, the thing that you have a gut feeling that you know you should be doing, you maybe aren't the most confident in that one lane, that one thing. So you want to hedge your bet on it and do two or three other things. I have a good example of this and I haven't talked about this before. Well, I've touched on it on the podcast before that I am involved in this startup. I used to work there full time and then I was an advisor and now I kind of do more like freelance. I don't even want to call it freelance. Like I work with them on a monthly basis. I do think that my decision to get more involved with the startup was me almost like hedging my bet on the fact that maybe I won't be successful on social media doing the podcast with my like one true purpose with my business. You hedge your bet by taking on another freelance client, by getting more involved in some other company, right? And now looking back about 6 months later, because I've been more involved for probably the last 6 months, I'm looking at it as, okay, that was me operating out of I'm hedging my bet in case it doesn't work, right? And I love the company. That's why I've been an advisor for the last couple of years. However, I'm probably going to end up taking a step back and not being as involved because I'm realizing that again, every opportunity that you take that's misaligned is you not allowing yourself to go all in on your one zone of genius. That was just like kind of a realization that I've been having really since the beginning of 2026 is that you do need to go all in on your one thing. And yeah, you can be hedging your bets.
No, no. Okay, we're going to get into this find your lane framework. So, we're going to talk about how to find that one thing. And I think the best way to go about it before you go all in on your lane. And part three or step three of this framework, I think, is so insanely valuable that if you're listening to this, stay tuned for step three because we are going to give some harsh advice. Okay. I will speak for myself. Harsh advice. Erin may be harsh or she may be more gentle, but I'm going to give
No,
some harsh advice.
we love the hardship. I feel like Grace is always the one. She's like, guys, I'm sorry. Don't. I'm a nice person. I
Guys, I
swear.
just like I love you all so dearly and I want this podcast to always be uplifting and motivating, but sometimes I think, for example, this is what like a month ago, this entrepreneur that I've been in like this program with him. He's literally one of the best, most talented entrepreneurs in this space, like in the creator industry. And I basically have been getting like mentored by him for free for several months now. And he called me out on procrastinating one day. He was like, I'm going to challenge you. He's like, do you actually need more information or are you just procrastinating here? Because I think you're just procrastinating. And I was like, oh my gosh, just on a live call with like other people on the call, mind you. And I was just like, okay, thank you. But the thing was, I needed to hear it because I was procrastinating. And so I think sometimes like we can get feedback from people. And if people are able to be honest, like honesty, I think sets you free. And I think sometimes we just need to hear it. So I hope to be uplifting and inspiring and motivating. However, I would also like to be honest with everyone listening. So, okay. Anyways, we'll get harsh later. But step one is to find the intersection of your skills and your passion. So your skills are just what you're naturally good at. And I want people to think I want you to reframe this idea. I think we hear this idea of, oh, well, I'm really good at math, so I should be a mathematician or a math tutor. No, that's not what I'm saying. You could do that, right? Like if you want to start a math tutoring company because you're good at math, absolutely get out there and do it, right? The children need it. However, you don't have to get so specific on the hard skills, like it also can be your soft skills. So like, for example, if you're like, I love and I'm really good at problem solving. I like when people come to me with problems and they're like, how do I figure this out? Maybe you would do really well as a day of wedding coordinator because there's going to be problems that come up and you're going to have to think on your feet about how you solve them. Or you might do really well as an executive assistant because they're going to have lots of problems that they need you to solve. They need you to take it and run with it. Let's say you are really creative and you just like doing creative things. Get your hands in different creative things. If you're good at creative stuff, get your hands in different creative things. Maybe you discover that, you're really passionate about fashion, but you actually don't really enjoy upcycling clothing. Like you like fashion, but that's just not your passion. Maybe you discover that you actually really love applying your creativity to video editing. And now you're doing video editing or whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be like, I am already so good at, again, math. And so I have to do math. It can be something a bit broader. So, like, think broader.
I think that most people inherently, whether it be like deep down or deep down, they know what the thing is,
Hmm.
but they're not thinking big enough or broad enough to actually know how to apply it. And I think that a couple of things to help you sort of identify what that thing might be. What do your friends come to you about, whether it be for advice or just because they know that that's a topic that you're interested in, curious about, that you know a lot about? For me, this is actually how I knew that I wanted to start doing something in the personal finance space because my friends, when we were graduating from college, they would come to me and ask, like, how do they set up their 401k at work? Or do they need a Roth IRA? Or, hey, can you take a look at my budget? They would ask me questions like that. And I was like, oh, I actually do know slightly more than my peers about this topic and I'm interested in it. The second one, what are you curious about? Like, what are those things that you find yourself like Googling all the time or looking up a book to read on a topic? And then what do you enjoy thinking about? I feel like everyone does have that thing that they just spend like an odd amount of time thinking about. You know, when you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, I want to go watch a YouTube video on this thing, or I want to go listen to a podcast episode on this thing. Those are just some thought starters that can help you find, again, looking at your intersection of skill and passion, you can
Mhm.
apply that as, okay, these are the things that I'm curious about and passionate about. And then what are my soft skills that can help me apply that? So whether
Mm.
you're a really good communicator, whether you are very good at problem solving, whether you are very creative, you can kind of apply those two and find that intersection to really find your lane that you should be going down.
Yes. And I want to emphasize that we're saying intersection of skill and passion because you are not going to be passionate about every skill that you have, and you might not be skilled in every passion that you have. And that is okay. That doesn't mean that you cannot become skilled in a passion that you have. It doesn't mean that you can't become passionate in a skill that you have, but it also means that you don't have to use every skill for something monetizable. Like my mom, for example, is amazing at crocheting. She crochets like little things. She went through this chapter where she was crocheting these baby Yodas. And anyone in my life, I had an acquaintance in college who mentioned to me, oh my gosh, that is so cute, this baby Yoda. And my mom literally was like, oh my gosh, I started making him one. Please get me his address. I sent an acquaintance a stuffed baby Yoda that my mother crocheted. But my mom has never wanted to monetize that. I used to be like, "Oh, you should make an Etsy." And she's like, "I don't want to do that." She's like, "It's a skill that I have and I enjoy it, but is it something I'm so passionate about I want to turn it into a business?" No. And there may be things that I'm passionate about cooking. I enjoy cooking. Do I want to monetize? Am I super skilled at it? No. Like I can cook, don't get me wrong, I can cook, but am I going to cook you like a restaurant level meal every day? No. And it's not something I want to monetize either. So don't feel like you have to turn every skill into a passion or a monetizable thing. And not every passion needs to become a job also. Like you can just leave it at that. So find the intersection of them. The third element of this though, and I think this is like the most important and the thing that gets left out of this conversation, and this is harshness number one, okay? You need to pay attention to the reality of the market. You do. What do people actually pay for? What are they actually paying for? And I don't mean what are they paying $2 for? I mean, what are they paying 50, 100, $200 for. Because if you want to turn something into a profitable thing, it needs to be something people are paying money for. And I say this so nicely, but I see this so often with people building an entire idea around something without checking what people actually want to pay for, or that people want to pay enough for it to be a sustainable way for you to earn income. And there become these fundamental core dilemmas where somebody is so passionate about something, they're so skilled at something, so they spend time and money and effort building an entire business around it. They're like, yeah, I have my website and I have this and I have that and I've done all the things. And I'm like, that's really beautiful. How many clients have you gotten so far? How many people have you booked? Did you ask anybody, hey, is this something you'd ever want to pay money for? Beyond your family and friends, ask somebody that has no stake in, like, hurting your feelings, whatever. And then they get to this point where they've done all this work and they find out nobody actually wants to pay for it, or nobody wants to pay for it at a price that is sustainable enough. And I think that it's a harsh reality, but there just are certain things people aren't going to pay for, or that the target market you're trying to market to is not a person who's going to pay for something at the amount that you are trying to sell it, you know? Like, and you have to understand that aspect of it. Like, if you are marketing to, trying to think of an example, but it's like, if you want to do, let's say, mobile haircuts, right? Okay, like I have a friend who runs a mobile, she does like mobile haircuts, right? She is doing like color with her business. So when you're getting your hair colored, you're getting highlights, you're getting all the things, you understand what the price is looking like for that, right? She can market to people who are in their late 20s and 30s who have the money to pay for someone to come to their home to do that, right? If you were maybe, let's say, marketing to, you're doing kids' haircuts, mobile kids' haircuts, I don't even have a child, but I know I'd probably pay in my 30s, I'd probably pay a few extra bucks to have someone come to my home to cut my kids' hair instead of having to send them, bring them to the super cuts or whatever. But let's say you're trying to market that to girls in their early 20s in a college town. Girls in their early 20s in a college town probably do not have the money to pay three, four, $500 to get their hair done. That's a fundamental core difference. People in that area are not paying for the service that you're trying to offer. Or if you want to offer, I've seen this with, there's like a breathwork studio that I went to years ago. And the cost, like, I don't think people in the studio ended up closing. And I don't think that people in that area wanted to pay 30, 40, $50 for a breathwork class. Like, because how many times are you going to go to a breathwork class in a month, right? When you can do breathwork online at home. So, and again, that areas, it was lots of like young people in their 20s. There are just certain things I feel like you have to think about with that. So, yes, find the intersection of skill and passion, but make sure that it is something that people actually want to pay for and that is needed in the market before you start to like go deeper on it.
And what can be a little bit tricky about figuring this out is ideally, and the best businesses are solving a problem that the market's not already solving. There's not already a product out there solving this particular problem. And yes, no idea is a unique idea. It's 2026. However, the best businesses find a gap in the market and find where there's not already a solution for it. So it's not as easy as saying, oh, let me go find the person in the town over that's doing the exact same business as me. It could be if your business is local and you're the first one in your market to do it and you're a first mover there. But I think, especially in the online space, the best businesses are coming from people doing something different. So you're not necessarily going to have that one to one comparison on, okay, this person did the exact same thing and they're charging $40 for it. So I need to charge $40 for it. But remembering your ideal target audience and their income, their price point that they might be willing to pay for it is a good way to think about it. One thing that has helped me a lot, and I know this sounds corny if you've ever taken like a marketing class before in college. I was a business major, so I took a few marketing classes. Understanding they call it the TAM, your total addressable market. Understanding that, and then the percentage of that market that you need to capture in order to have a successful business. And I'm saying this from a perspective of, if you're doing it correctly, I think this should be very motivating for you because you realize that you don't actually have to capture that big of a percentage of the market to have a successful business. For example, this is something that I'm working on right now. And I feel like I might have talked about this on the podcast before. But back in 2025, I realized that I wanted to pivot my niche a little bit to from general personal finance to helping content creators and digital entrepreneurs with their finances, right? So that's a niche, a very specific niche. If I were to build a $49 product for that market, according to ChatGPT, there are 27 million paid content creators in the US. Of that, 12 million do it full time, 8 million are part time, and 7 million are hobbyists, but still monetize a little bit. So 27 million people would be my total addressable market. If I built a $49 product for that market, I would only need to capture 20,408 people out of 27 million people to make $1 million in my business. 20,000 people out of 27 million people. And I think that that's, again, just a good exercise to run when you're thinking of, okay, what would people actually pay for? But who's the people? Who am I actually marketing toward? And what addressable market am I actually looking at?
I think that those details are things that people overlook. And I think, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily know unless you're around other entrepreneurs or you're having these types of conversations or listening to these types of podcasts. But I always find it inspiring when I talk to online coaches because they're selling, for example, there are health coaches that I know who, in order to actually see an impact, if let's say you're working with a fitness coach because you want to, you know, gain 10 pounds and build muscle or whatever, you have to work with them for a few months in order to see results. So you're typically paying for, a 3-month package. And let's say that 3-month package is $3,000. When those types of people actually do the math on, okay, if I want to make, you know, $300,000, I need to have this many customers. Wow, that's actually not that many people. And then you think about, I have a business coach who she's very open about this. Her Instagram account is small relative to like an influencer. I think she has like 12 or 15,000 followers. Her posts are not going madly, madly viral, getting millions of views. Her posts get usually a couple thousand or less views, but yet she's posted her income. I think she made $1 million cash last year, like cash collected, cash that hit her bank account, not like sales that people are going to pay her next year, cash collected. Because the thing is, the market for what she's doing, there are significant enough people with what she is charging to where she can make that. So go run the numbers on some of this stuff after this episode because you will see. I think it will be more motivating than anything. I love doing that too with my templates. I'm like, okay, if I want to make this much for my templates, and I know that my conversion rate is this much. I just need to get this many views, this many comments, and that's motivating because that gives me something that I can work toward. And I don't know. I think it's very motivating.
Yeah, let's move on to step 2, which is figuring out your energy and your capacity. And I think this is more so going from finding your lane and almost your purpose to finding the tactical, like, okay, how do I achieve my purpose? Right. Because again, using the podcast as an example, our purpose is to help ambitious women build a life they truly love. Okay, well, there's so many different things we could be doing to help women build a life they love.
Hmm.
Right. But to find your lane and what you're going to tactically work on to help you achieve your purpose, some things that you need to look at are your energy and your capacity. And when we say your energy, we mean what gives you energy versus drains you. One example that I like to use for myself is I am definitely more introverted, which kind of surprises people because I do social media
Same.
and I have a podcast. But I'm definitely more introverted in that talking to people really does drain my energy. Like I need to recharge after I talk. So coaching, specifically group coaching, is something that I never ever want to get into. I am totally fine talking on this podcast, love yapping with Grace for an hour. I can talk to my phone screen when I'm posting videos on social media. I don't love the idea of coaching, specifically group coaching, because that requires me to be very personable in front of a lot of people, developing presentations, public speaking. Public speaking is another thing that I'm really not that interested in. So that's not the direction that I'm going to take my business. I'm not going to build my business around coaching and public speaking. I'm going to build it more around media. So podcast episodes, YouTube videos, digital products, things that aren't going to drain my energy.
Hmm. Even just down to things like, it sounds silly, but driving. Do you actually enjoy driving around? Like, do you like, some people are big into driving, they put their little music on, they whatever, they're cool. Some people, it's like so frustrating. If you do not enjoy driving, do not do a mobile something or other business, or like don't, yeah, try to do Instacart as your side hustle, or don't, I don't know, build something that requires you to travel a lot to it. Like, you have to think about what actually, yeah, like what gives you energy. The other thing to think about with energy is, where do you lose track of time? Like, what are you doing? And I think this is, it's a bit of a cliche, to be honest, but I want to talk about it. People will say, like, figure out where you lose track of time. Like, what are you doing where time just passes you by? For me, there's not really a task that, I mean, there are some things where I'm like, wow, my day flew by, but it's usually when on days when I'm very focused on something. And I think my capacity to focus reveals what I'm enjoying a bit more. Like, where can I actually lock in and focus versus what tasks am I like, ugh, and this feels like it's taking a while to go by. A lot of my days do fly by with what I do now. So I think it's kind of the collective of things, but also being really realistic with yourself about what your capacity looks like. For example, if you have a full time job and you're wanting to start something, right? What can you choose that allows you to kind of start small versus like, what requires a ton of your time? For example, if you have a full time job and you want to open your own hair salon, unless you're going to quit that job and, open your own hair salon full time, perhaps renting a chair somewhere and having clients after work hours or on the weekends or whatever, maybe that's like your first step. And then you do that lane, you build your clientele, and then you go into buying a whole building that you turn into a hair salon that you rent out chairs to other people. Like, maybe you pick something that is, small, because right now you have your full time job and you need that full time job for your finances or whatever, and that's, be like realistic about what your capacity looks like.
And that goes so, so perfectly into step 3, which is so important, so important. It's your proof of
Yes.
concept, okay? And Grace just gave an amazing example, which, let's say your passion is doing people's hair. You just love it. You're so good at it, or you think that you would be really good at it because of X, Y, and Z. I don't know much about being a hairstylist, but you need a proof of concept. And testing this lane that you want to go down with a low risk experiment is so, so important. I think when people hear entrepreneurship or starting a business, they immediately think of getting into something that's going to cost them so much money up front. It does not have to be that way. If you want
Mhm.
to get into hairstyling and you want to open up your own salon one day, go rent a chair for a couple hundred
Mhm.
dollars a week or however much it costs to rent a chair
Yeah.
at a salon. Let's say you want to get into like wedding photography, but you don't have a camera. Okay, maybe something that you could do is getting into wedding content creation where you can use your iPhone and film videos, right?
Mhm.
Another really good example of testing your proof of concept in a very low risk way, honestly, a free way, is social media. And that's why people talk about social media as being the best opportunity for starting your business because it's free. You can test your ideas and test your concepts in a 1 minute video and see what people respond to. You can talk
Mhm.
about the exact same idea 10 different ways and see which direction people respond to better. You can
Yes.
constantly iterate and get that feedback time and time again in a way that takes you very little time and cost literally $0.
I get so passionate about this. I think because I talk about freelancing and business on my LinkedIn, on Instagram, TikTok, everything. I will get people who reach out to me and I feel for them, but they will say, I want to be a full-time freelancer. So I paid this money for this other course, and I paid money to have someone build my website, and I paid money for this and I did that and I did it. And I'm like, you want to offer social media management services to local dog rescues. This is an example that I use. This isn't one that someone specific did because I would not call out their specific thing, but it's like, you want to offer social media management to local dog rescues. What are they affording for social media management? They probably have a volunteer that's doing it. So you want to charge $3,000 a month for social media management for a local dog rescue. I'm sorry.
And
That,
spend thousands
yeah,
of dollars getting your
exactly.
website and
You
your professional
spent
headshots
all
and
this money doing all this thing or whatever. Or yeah, you'll go get your professional headshots done. And then I'm like, so you just spent the money, but you didn't even test to see if your idea works out. And I just, for the love of all things, like, please test your idea in a low risk experiment in a small way before you get into it. When I work with startups, because a lot of my, I think all of my clients at this point are startups to a degree, they have a term called MVP, which is minimum viable product. And every smart entrepreneur that I've ever worked with, all of my startup clients, they create an MVP of a product before they put it out there. And when I mean minimum viable product, sometimes it is literally just a landing page that has a little bit of information, which, if you're not familiar with the term landing page, that just means one page on a website. One page. And there are free website designs. You can make a free landing page on
Canva,
Canva.
yeah.
Like, there's so many different ways to do it. It will literally be a landing page that just has a little bit of information about what they're building, what they're doing, da da da. You can look up examples. And then a way for people to connect with them. And I literally, like, I know people who own $1 million agencies, $1 million companies. And when I started working with them in the beginning, they still had MVPs where it was one page about what they are doing. And then when they started to get clients in, they thought, okay, now I will invest in building this out. I want to say also, this is all just to protect your time, your money, and your effort. Do not go building something without testing it first. It just doesn't make any sense. But when you do this, when you build a proof of concept, what that allows you to do is, like Erin was saying, to get feedback. But what I want you to pay attention to with that feedback is, like, how are people responding? Don't ask your dang friends and family, right? Friends and family are so lovely. However, they're going to be biased because they like you, they want to support you. Go ask other people. Even if you're not on social media, go get in a Facebook group that's like, if you don't want to post like out to the masses, go get in a Facebook group for your local community and post and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. Is this something people would be interested in? Here's like an anonymous Google form, and say, like, is this something you'd be interested in? Yes or no? Or get out in the public. Let's say you want to do something that's like more, for your local market. Get out in the public, talk to people about it, go to a co-working spot, go to a coffee shop, chat somebody up and say, I'm working on this thing. Would this be of interest? Or go look at the reviews of other similar businesses in your area. What are people booking? Does it seem like people are doing well? Are they not? Whatever. Pay attention to the feedback people give. Then pay attention. Do they pay? Are people paying money when you have this proof of concept? So, using the hairdresser example, let's say you decide to rent a booth. I don't know what the cost of that is, but let's say you're going to try to build that. Are people paying for the services that you want to offer? Are they referring others? Like, how is it going? What feedback are they giving you? Are people rebooking? Are they saying, oh my gosh, like, there was this one stylist back in my hometown. She gave amazing head massages whenever she would wash people's hair, to the point where, and no one else in the area would do that. Everyone just kind of like, rushing through. People were referring her because she had a good head massage, right? And people were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, that was the best hair wash I've ever had. Are people giving you feedback like that? Are they saying, wow, this is like the best cut I've had. Oh my gosh, the way you did the color. You're so fun to talk to. Like, what are they saying? Because that will give you an idea of how you can then take it and scale it. But if people are saying, like, if they're not booking again, if they're not referring people, if they don't seem to be resonating with the message that you have, or they don't value it, they're like, oh yeah, like, you're offering this for $300, but like, it's a little bit out of my budget. If people are saying that, great. Now you can either iterate or pivot before you build this into a gigantic thing.
And like you said, this is all to save you time and money up front, because I do think that any decision is better than no decision. If you have done this in the past where you spent a lot of money on something and then it didn't end up working out, don't beat yourself up
No.
over it. I've done that so many
Yeah.
times. Spent money on the websites and the whatever it may be on things that didn't end up panning out. You can't think about those. They're sunk costs at this point. However, we do want to save you guys time and money moving forward. And I think one example of this, let's go back to the social media management example, right? Instead of spending a whole month or 2 months building your website and getting the professional headshots and making the most beautiful portfolio, why don't you go take those 2 months and go down to your local restaurant and say, hey, can I do your social media for free for 2 months? Because I'm really trying to build up my portfolio. That is going to
Yeah.
be so much more lucrative in the long run, building up your skills and building up your portfolio, even though it's technically free work, rather than spending a bunch of money and spending a bunch of time doing your website, getting your portfolio done.
Hmm.
I hire UGC creators, which if you aren't sure of the difference between UGC and social media management, really the big difference is that with UGC, you're typically not posting the video, you're just creating the content and sending it to the brand. But with social media management, a lot of times you're creating the content and posting it to their social media channel. I hire a lot of UGC creators for my job with the startup, and people send me, like, I'll get a lot of inbounds for people who are offering UGC services, and they'll send me links to these really well done portfolios, quote unquote, but I hate reading through them. They're 5 pages long. It takes me forever to get to video examples. It's a bunch of nonsense that I don't even read. Whereas some people will literally just send me links to prior TikTok videos
Mhm.
that they made. They might not even be actual UGC videos, they're just videos that they've posted on their own TikTok account.
Mhm.
I've hired so many of those people because it saves me a lot of time from having to read through your portfolio.
Yeah.
So it's all just a waste of time, and we don't want you to waste your time or waste your money.
No, and also too, like, I mean, I've been freelancing for 4.5 years. I don't have a portfolio. I had one at one point when I was doing blog writing, and it was just this website that allowed me to link to a bunch of my live pieces that I had done. I don't have a portfolio that highlights my social media management. I've been trying to work on one to put one together because I'm like, yeah, I should probably have something that highlights, my work. And then I decided to embed it into my website. So then I pivoted, but I don't have, like, I do ghostwriting work. I don't have a portfolio of ghostwriting work. I can't actually because signed contracts say I can't say who the client is. So I can't be saying, oh, I wrote for this person and I put this here, whatever. I don't have that. Like, I focused on getting good at the work and building my network of people to where so many people, I get referrals and inbounds to where I refer projects out to people now. I'm not even taking on any more clients. I refer them out because nobody, no one cares about my portfolio. Is it helpful to have something to send people? Yes. And in my freelance course, I will tell like all my students when I review their portfolios, I'm like, move your about me to the bottom. Nobody cares. Nobody
Nobody
cares about
cares.
reading 3 paragraphs about you. Is it cutesy to have like oh yeah, I did it? Yes, but nobody cares where you went to college. No one cares about any of that. It's like the time that you spend putting together, again, getting your headshots done and putting together this whole website, spend it getting better at the thing that you want to do. Like, make a UGC video. I get passionate about this because I feel like people will spend so much time putting together a website, they'll send it to me, and then I look at the videos in the portfolio and the videos are not good. And I'm like, you need to focus on the thing that you're offering. Again, pick the lane, stay in it, get good at it. Anyways, okay, moving forward, because I'm on my
Yeah, we
soapbox.
could.
I need
It's
to get off my soapbox. We
yes.
have more to say. When you're like testing your proof of concept, the thing you need to think about once you're paying attention to the feedback and understanding what are people saying? What are they paying for? Are they referring others? How is this going? How are people responding to what I'm doing? You need to know when to iterate versus pivot. And this is another thing that I feel like we have to be harsh about. So sorry. All this harshness is delivered with love. There is a time when it's like, okay, I feel like I'm onto something here. I just need to iterate and make a couple changes. And there are times where you just need to fully pivot. You need to scrap the idea and you need to move on to something else. And that is hard to do, right? But it's really important. And I'm going to give you a couple examples. If you're going to iterate, you would iterate when people like the service, but they don't love it. So instead of pivoting, you iterate and you add more to the offering. So you say, okay, you know what? People like the service, but I'm not getting like rave reviews where people are like overwhelmed by this. How can I add more value to the service to where people love it? For example, the head massage girl that worked at the salon, she worked at like a little local salon that my cousin owned actually. Booking with her, it could be the same exact price as the girl in the booth next to her, but she was offering more value in her service because she gave these head massages and it literally, I'm not even joking, this sounds so ridiculous, but it spread around this small town I lived in because again, it was the local hair salon. People were like, oh my gosh, she is so good. She gives the best head massages. People now were like, okay, when I'm looking at my haircut for $50, yeah, of course I'm going to go with the girl who gives the good head massage over the girl who doesn't because she gives me more value for the cost I'm paying. That doesn't mean, okay, if people aren't raving about this, I should scrap the idea. It means they like it. So let me iterate and add more value. Another example is like if your price is slightly too high, if you're finding people are asking you for discounts all the time, or which that could also just be they're not marketing to the right people, but that's a whole other situation. But if people are asking for discounts all the time, or if people, let's say it's a service that you do on a scheduled basis. So you do eyebrow waxing and you're like, oh, people should come once a month, and you're finding people are kind of stretching it. And maybe they're not seeing, like, they feel like the price is too high for them to be coming back. How can you, again, iterate? Can you add more value? Can you offer some sort of, rewards program that when you come back, you get more, whatever it may be? Or are they not referring others? Okay, how can I add more value to where people want to spread my name and refer everybody? Or, for example, if you're doing UGC and you pitch to a bunch of people and you only get one response from pitching UGC, that does not mean that you throw in the towel. It means you iterate. You say, okay, you know what? What might be happening here? They could be reading my pitches, but my content's not good enough, so they're not responding. Or maybe instead of pitching, maybe I iterate and I try posting my UGC videos on social media and tagging brands I'd want to work with. Or maybe I try, networking with people on LinkedIn that I know hire UGC creators, and that's my focus for the next month. And I iterate, right? It does not mean throw the whole thing out the window, but you iterate. If you're going to pivot, some examples of when you would pivot would be people are not paying at all. And I say this with love. I think if you have a business and you are not making any money from it, it is a hobby. That is a hobby, not a business. Businesses are profitable, they make money. A hobby is something that you do for enjoyment that you are not monetizing. You have to make money at the end of the day if you want it to be a sustainable business. If people are not paying, there is a core issue. Something is going on that needs to be addressed. Do not continue to just go in circles over and over and over again and say, well, people aren't paying, boo hoo, wah, wah, wah. Okay, figure it out. Find a solution as to why people are not paying for your service. If the only people that are buying are people that know you, that is also an indicator of, okay, something is not working here. Maybe we need to pivot to another idea. Or if the profit margins are extremely small and people are not willing to pay more, there are certain things. I've seen this with startup clients in the past where they try to sell a service for, let's say, $100 to a market that just does not value that service at $100 at all. They're like, yeah, no, I just don't even like that at all. It does not make sense. Or if the profit margins are so extremely small, like if you are, again, if you're trying to sell social media marketing services to local dog rescues, and actually, this happened to me. I'll use my own example. When I first started doing social media management, I wanted to do it for purpose driven companies. So, like nonprofits and companies with some sort of like charitable focus. And so I put out a survey, a Google form, and I sent it to some people that I knew who had companies like that in my network. And it was anonymous. And I was like, how much would you be able to afford for a social media management package of this scope? Y'all, the rates were like $250 a month, $500 a month. I was shook because I was thinking in my head, I want to scale this to something where I can make $3, 4, $5,000 a month from social media management packages of this scope. Their budget is a fraction of that. There is no way, unless I take on a bajillion clients, which that doesn't work, or if I hire someone for help. But if I hire someone for help, my profit margins are going to be significantly reduced. This is a fundamental core dilemma in the business idea that I came up with. And so I pivoted. And that's when I said, okay, I'm going to work with financial tech startups. And that's what I found worked. Fintechs had more money. They were able to pay. I enjoyed it because I enjoyed the financial mission, the financial education. But you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest to know, do I need to iterate or do I need to pivot entirely? And that's what your proof of concept can help you find.
And I think if you're doing it correctly, every single business is going to iterate so much that by
Yes.
the end of the day, it's going to feel like a pivot. Like you didn't go from purpose driven companies to financial tech startups. You tried other things in between,
Hmm.
right? And I think that this transitions us well to this kind of next section, which is discussing specialization versus generalization. Because at the end of the day, again, we're getting to our one lane that we're going down and we're sticking with that lane. And that lane is probably going to require us to have a very specific target market. If you're trying to talk to everybody, you're talking to nobody. If you're trying to solve a problem for everybody, you're solving a problem for nobody, or the problem that's being solved is so general that you're going to have to keep your price point very, very low because it's not solving that big of a problem. So it's this kind of balance between specialization and generalization. However, I think if you're just getting started, it's not a good use of your time to focus so much on the specialization because you need to test and iterate in order to get to that specialization. For example, when I started creating content, I knew that I was interested in money, right? Money and personal finance is so broad. It's as broad as health and wellness, right? It's
Mhm.
one of those kind of like overall broad niches that people start talking about online. And that's what I was doing. I was creating content for everybody. All of my content was super general. It was like 3 budgeting tips, like to blah, 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 right? However, that's not necessarily where I am today, or that's not where I'm getting to today. But I had to test and iterate a lot in order to find a specific target market that I actually wanted to talk to. And what I'm kind of learning now is I'm actually a lot more passionate about talking to people from a financial perspective who are actively trying to have multiple streams of income, start a side business, maybe become fully self-employed. That's more what I'm interested in, helping those people build real wealth rather than just talking generally from a personal finance perspective of, okay, I'm going to help everybody be better with their money. That is so broad. However, if you're just getting started, you don't necessarily need to know what your sub niche is and exactly who you're talking to. You can find that out later. Another good example of this is my friend Gabrielle. We talk about her a lot on the podcast because she's in a different niche. So it's a good example. Her Instagram is dietitian Gabrielle, and she's a registered dietitian, right? And when she first started posting on social media, her content was very broad: nutrition advice, health and wellness. However, as she has been doing this longer and longer, she fell into her sub niche, which is now she only really talks about gut health and fiber. Like that's her niche, right? So she's talking to people who specifically struggle with gut health problems and helps them fix their gut health problems by helping them get more fiber.
Mm.
That is so specific. But if she would have waited to start posting on social media until she found that passion, that sub niche, she never would have gotten started. She had to iterate until she got there.
Yes, I think sometimes people spend too much time worrying about what they are going to become a specialist in that they don't even get good at anything. Like they're so not confused, but yeah, they just get so like lost in that. And yeah, with my social media management, when I first started, my first client was a men's fragrance company. Then I worked with a toothpaste company. Then I worked with a deodorant company. Then it was a financial tech startup. It was like so many different things. And the thing was is that of course the way you market a brand is different, like depending on what the brand is, whether it's, a consumer packaged good or whether it's a online service or whatever, whether it's medical or not, whatever, of course, that there are differences. But the psychology of it, consumer psychology, the kind of like philosophy around marketing and how you speak to people, that translates. So if I sat there never starting because I was like, well, I don't know what kind of client I want to start with. I don't know what I want to be a specialist in. I want to be a social media manager for who? Then I would have never done anything. But then after trying different clients for a year, I realized, okay, yeah, I want to do financial or social media management for financial tech startups. That's what I'm really enjoying. And then I became a writer because I was like, I actually really enjoy writing. And now I have a bunch of knowledge on these financial topics and it was a personal passion of mine. There's a sweet spot. But I also like to think too, and this was like a good reframe for me. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, I am someone who enjoys doing a lot of things. And so the idea of specializing or focusing on one lane always kind of freaked me out. And so what I kind of have reframed it in my head as is a focus for a period of time rather than a specialty. Now, of course, if you are going into an industry where like a specialty makes sense. Let's say you want to, the first thing that comes to mind is being a chiropractor. Let's say you want to open your own chiropractic practice. The one that I was going to was specifically for like moms and babies and kids, but they work with like women in general. And that's why I went there because my back pain was because of my adenomyosis. And for them, that specialty of moms and babies makes sense, right? However, it's more if you think about it as like a how do I'm like, how do I visually describe this? Let's think of it as like a ball with like an aura around it, like a ball with a little glow around it. Their ball is moms and babies that they do chiropractic for, but it has this aura around it where it's like they can still offer that service to women, but when they're marketing, they're speaking directly to those people. So that makes sense, right? It's a specialty. They're not going to say, oh, well, I went to chiropractic school, so now I'm going to open a dental practice. Of course, that doesn't make sense. But when you're thinking about it as a focus for a period of time, you allow yourself the space to get good at something. And then you can take the hard and soft skills that you just developed by getting good at that thing, and it translates to other things when you decide to dip into another lane. So, if the idea of like, because I used to view being a specialist as I'm committing to doing that one thing forever and I'm branding myself as that one thing forever, but that's not the case. So, a couple of examples, let's say you want to do a charcuterie board setup business. I've seen a lot of these, or like picnic setup business. You don't need to be a cheese master, right? Like you don't need to sit there getting all these, trying cheese for 6 weeks, babe. Like get out there. You can start to, pay attention to the visual design of the board, or the balance of the board, or different, maybe a different shape of the board looks good, or whatever it might be. Then when you get good at that, that will translate to when people want to do dessert boards. Now you can offer dessert boards too. Oh, would you like a charcuterie board for the main event of the party or whatever? And then we can do a dessert board setup or drink setup. Or maybe then you branch into, okay, now I'm going to do picnic setup. Do you want picnic and charcuterie board at the beach? Whatever. Because you gave yourself time to focus on getting good at those things. Or if you are a UGC creator, you can be more of a generalist. You don't need to specialize in a specific type of brands, like, oh, I only do UGC for fashion brands or businesses or whatever. It's probably best to just focus on getting good at your camera angles and your whatever, like focus on just getting better as a UGC creator. Or if you're a social media manager, again, you don't have to focus on just tech companies or clothing brands or whatever, or you can focus on just a subset of people, but you don't have to get as granular to say local clothing boutiques in St. Pete, Florida. But you do need to pick a focus, an area of focus.
And I think this topic of focus, this is almost going to an entirely separate conversation that we can do an entire episode around if you guys would be interested in, because I feel like we could talk about this for so long. But this topic of focus, too, I think transcends into whether or not you're focused on product or marketing, right? And it depends what type of business you want to start, but especially in the online space where how you market your product or service is through posting on social media and speaking directly to your target audience. Do you spend your focus on the marketing, which is the social media content, or the product, which is the back end of the business? Whether you want to get into coaching, or you want to build a course, or you want to offer a digital template, or whatever it may be, building a resource of some sort, are you going to spend your focus on the product or the marketing? And that can also become a very short term period of, okay, I need to go heads down for the next 3 months and strictly focus on the product. And then I'm going to figure out how to market it. Because are you getting a bunch of views for a product that's not built yet?
Mhm.
So figuring that out as well, I think is a very, yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You don't want to disappear on social media for 3 months, but maybe it is taking a back burner and you're doing the bare minimum while you are focused on building up the actual product and back end of your business.
Yeah. I think this balance between specializing and generalizing it's a conversation that's had a lot on these types of, podcast episodes and on social media and things. But I think that, again, as someone who was very not anti specialist, but I just didn't see myself as a specialist, kind of reframing it to where I'm focusing was really helpful. And what I learned by doing that and by focusing on, one kind of mission at a time was that I actually operate better that way, because when I'm trying to be that octopus and have my arms in a million different things, what it does is it creates a bunch of like open mental loops for me, to where I'm thinking about, okay, how am I marketing my digital product? I have the podcast over here. I have my brandos over here. I have my organic content here. I have LinkedIn content here. I'm, building something else over here. I have my, freelance clients over here. And if I had multiple freelance clients, to me, that's like multiple octopus arms. That's not even under one octopus arm. Now I'm an octopus that's having to sprout extra arms to be able to like manage all of these things. And it creates these open mental loops that occupy brain space, versus if I have fewer things, I can focus on managing those mental loops better. I get into a flow state where then I can hand off parts of it. Once I have a good flow with my content, which I do now, my assistant reposts my content to YouTube. I can hand that off to him. I don't need to be doing that anymore. That takes a mental loop away from me. I give that off to somebody. It's functioning well. We have a system now with the podcast where we have a flow of like who's editing it and who's writing the show notes and when is it going up and when is it getting scheduled and how the social clips are being pulled and all of these things to where like because we spent time focusing on those systems and making sure that it was working well. And I think that that allows me like a better, I don't know, just helps with my mental. And I think of it as like seasonal, not necessarily like, fall, winter, spring, whatever. But I mean, there are seasons of life where I am focusing more on something. Right now, I'm focusing more on my social media, like, and on social media and the podcast than I am freelancing. That is my focus. So I can build it to the next level and then choose what I want to do from there. But that's my focus that I'm getting good at. And I think mentally it's actually less mental load.
And I think that brings us to the last kind of point that we want to give you guys as a takeaway from this episode is the art of saying no. And these can be very seasonal, like you said. It's not a no forever. It's just you respecting yourself enough to say, no, I told myself I was going to focus on this for this specific period of time until it gets to a point where I can outsource some of it, delegate some of it. Because that's the other thing with outsourcing and delegation. You yourself have to be very good at it before
Mhm.
you can effectively delegate. Delegation is not one of those things that you can say, well, I'm not great at this. I've never really had a newsletter before, but now I want to have a newsletter as a part of my business. So I'm just going to delegate it. No,
Mhm.
it has to be a situation where you have a newsletter that's operating very well and it has systems. Now you're going to bring someone in that's going to take over those systems. And like you said, get those loops out of your brain and into their brain. But if you yourself haven't mastered it, you're not going to bring someone in and they're not going to effectively do it. I have tried many times
Because
and
you
it
don't know how
doesn't
to
work.
explain it to them. You can't
Yes, you
teach
don't know how
somebody how
to
to do something you don't know, you
because it's
know?
your business. It's
Mhm.
your business. So just the art of saying no as like I told myself I was going to focus on the podcast for the next 6 months. So I'm not going to say yes to this new freelance opportunity. I am not going to start taking on public speaking gigs. I'm not going to start building this coaching program, whatever it may be, just respecting yourself enough to stick to the focus that you've defined for yourself.
Mhm. I know that this idea of FOMO comes up where it's like, "Oh my gosh, but what am I missing out on by focusing on one thing?" And I wanna say this, that you are already missing out on reaching your full potential by doing too many things at once. You are already missing out on your full potential by trying to do too many things at once, because you don't even know what your full potential is if you zeroed in on one thing because you're not doing that. And I think when I realized that, that helped me commit to focusing on something because I'm like, if I'm only kind of half doing a bunch of different things, or my brain is constantly thinking about how to be good at all of these things, what would actually happen if I gave all of my brain to this thing? I could probably do a lot more. And when I actually have made those kinds of decisions, I have been able to do a lot more with those things. And so this idea of, oh, what am I missing out on? It's, babe, what are you missing out on by not doing the one thing? You're thinking about what you're missing out on by not doing all the things. What about what you're missing out on by not doing the one thing really well? So to figure out, like, should I accept an opportunity? Should I not? When you're trying to think about where to put your focus, there's a couple questions to ask yourself that help me figure out, is this something that is aligned with my purpose and my lane, or is this something that's distracting me from that? And question one is, am I excited about this? If it's not a heck yeah, it's probably a heck no. Does this align with my current focus? And be very honest with yourself. Is this actually aligning with my focus? Will this move me closer to my goals, or is it distracting me? And am I saying yes from excitement or fear? Think about the fear. Am I saying yes to this? Like Erin was saying about the company she works with, like, am I saying yes to this because I'm hedging my bets to be like, oh, well, if this doesn't work out, at least I have that? Or am I saying yes because this is an opportunity that I'm like, yes, like recently there was an opportunity that came my way that it's not my current focus, but I know that in a couple of years, I want to be doing something a little different. I won't show up, but something a little different. And I got an opportunity that would be basically preparing me to be able to do that thing really well. And it's an insane opportunity, super exciting. I'm like, yes. Is it perfectly aligned with what my immediate focus is right now? No, but my focus, it's setting me up for the next level, and it will help me in this current period too. But you have to think about that as well. And I
And I
will
think
say, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, and the question to ask yourself on, will this move me closer to my goals or distract me? I think it's easy to say, okay, well, it's going to move me closer to my income goal. It's going to help me make more
Mm,
money. I think you need to take it a step deeper because what
mhm,
is your actual goal? I promise you, as someone who has scaled their income in their 20s, and I know you have too, the money is not the goal. The purpose and the passion behind what you're doing is the goal. You are not going to be fulfilled by the money. If you made twice the amount of money as you're currently making, you're not going to feel fulfilled by it. You need to take it a step deeper and say, is this moving me closer to my actual goal? My goal being my purpose and my passion.
mhm. I think that there's this piece that comes into this too, and I wanted to make sure that I shared this little story or tidbit in this episode. When we think about saying no to something and saying yes to something else, sometimes there's this element of trust that comes into that. Trust in yourself, trust in a higher power if you believe in one, or trusting that things are going to work out for you and work out in your favor. There's this level of trust that has to be there. And we could do an entire episode on building self trust and how to, like, trust yourself to take leaps of faith and risks and whatever. But I have found, and I mean this with my whole heart, since I started doing this, and I have to remind myself of this all the time, but anytime I say no to something that is misaligned, something better always fills its spot. And the things that you want in life literally cannot enter your life if you don't have time for it. And the most perfect example of this was that I was about, I think, a year or so, a year and some change into running my freelance business. And I had a client at the time who paid me the most I had ever been paid for a monthly retainer. And it was $1,800, which is so crazy to look back at because that was life changing money to me at that time. And now that's like, I would never take a contract on at that rate. And I remember this client was, I would say, verbally abusive to other members of the team, not directly to me, but also very disrespectful of my time. I give them my phone number, which never do that, never give a client your phone number. I learned the hard way, but they would call me at 7 p.m. when I'm at the gym. They would text me at 2 in the morning. We'd have 30-minute calls and they would keep us on there for 2.5 hours. And, it felt like you couldn't leave and it was awful. And I didn't like the way they spoke to other people. And I remember talking to one of my friends. I was like, I hate this. Like, I want to let this client go so bad, but nobody has ever paid me this much in a month. And I just don't know how I could give up that kind of income. And maybe I just need to tough it out. And my friend said to me, she's like, this is like such a misaligned opportunity for you. Like, this is not anything that you want in a client. You don't even stand by the product. It didn't work for me, but it worked for, tons of people. But she's like, it's not even something that like excites you, that you're like overwhelmed with joy about. She was like, let it go. And I promise you, like, something better is going to fill its spot. And we sat there on that call and I was like sobbing. And I eventually, at the end of the call, I said, I'm going to fire blank, this man's name. I'm not even joking you. The split second that I finish that sentence, I get a Slack message from a client that still to this day is one of the best people I have ever worked with. Sends me a Slack message and says like, "Hey, I know this is a bit of a long shot, but do you happen to have another 15 hours a week of work because we need help with this new thing? We would love to have you do it because we love working with you." The exact amount of money those 15 hours a week were going to be was over the course of a month was $1,800. So the exact amount of money that I had just given up literally came back to me in a way that was so much better. And what's even crazier about it was that contract, those 15 hours a week of work, was where I started to learn so much more. I was doing content writing for them. I started to learn so much more about finances, which then translated when I started my social media later that year. I knew so much more than I did before. I was able to dive into a passion because I'm researching this topic I'm passionate about all day long. I became a content writer. Then I ended up getting more content writing clients, and blog writing was a hugely, wildly profitable service for me for a long time. It led me to being a newsletter writer, a ghost letter writer. I have ghost letter writer, go newsletter ghostwriter, and ghostwriter in general. But that opportunity, me saying no, the money came right back to me and it helps get me closer to my passion. If I had never said no to that guy, to a misaligned opportunity, I don't know that the other things would have fallen into place the way they did. So there has to be this element of trust too when you're saying no to things, to commit to focusing on something else and to focusing on more aligned opportunities. And we can do a whole entire episode on building that self trust and how to do that. But I just wanted to share that because I know that this idea of staying in one lane or focusing on one thing, it does come up, that FOMO and that how do I trust myself to do that? And I hope that that story, it's something I go back to a lot. And I hope that it's inspiring for other people too. And that it gives people the faith to say no to something and trust that something better is going to come.
I love that. And I think that that's a perfect spot to end today's episode. Like we said, if there are kind of like follow up questions or conversations that you want us to have on this topic, definitely let us know because we covered a lot in this episode, kind of at a high level. And I feel like so many of these pieces that we discussed could be entire separate episodes. So please let us know on Spotify if there's anything that you would want us to talk about in a future episode. But with that, thanks for tuning into the podcast. And until next week.